And we are live. Hello, everybody. This is the 14th episode of How to Succeed in Architecture. Let me just switch to my screen share right here for everybody that is watching. So here we go. I'm going to go full screen. And today I'm really excited about this episode because it's in collaboration with the AIA in San Francisco for their annual festival, Architecture and the City. So go check it out. Check out the website. It's amazing. And if you live in the San Francisco Bay Area, make sure to attend at least 10 events. Okay, at least 2. All right, okay. So next right here, if you want to keep current with everything no-veg related, like our webinars and Hangout series, sign up for our mailing list. And no-veg is the software here reseller behind the Hangout, this Hangout series. We sell over 8,000 products from 150 brands, from Autodesk to Rhino to Vectorworks, whatever you want, we have it. All right, so let me start with our panelists right here. Andrew, can I start with you? Can I ask you to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, my name is Andrew Dunbar. I'm a co-founder of Interfaith Architects, which is a landscape architecture and architecture firm in San Francisco. We're a transdisciplinary firm. The partner which founded the firm with me is Zoe Astrakhan. She's a landscape architect. I'm an architect, and we do work that sort of does both disciplines and does them together very often. We are a team of about 8 to 10 people in the city, and with a strong commitment to sort of public space and working in between the margins of architecture and landscape, but sometimes focusing just on landscape and sometimes focusing just on architecture, and very often we try to find projects that do both together.
Thank you, Andrew. And David, tell us a little bit about your practice.
I'm Dave Darling. I co-founded Aidlin Darling Design with my partner Joshua Aidlin in 1997. We built the office literally around a wood shop with the intent of cultivating a collaborative and multidisciplinary design studio specializing in architecture, but also furniture design, landscape design, lighting design, etc. And with the intent of designing for all the human senses.
That's wonderful. And we have another David that today I'm going to call Dave for the show so we don't get confused. So Dave, tell us a little bit about Home Matters and what you do.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Dave Brown. I'm the Executive Director of the National Navalworks Association and CEO of Home Matters. Home Matters is a national movement that's redefining the American dream. We believe the new American dream is one where every American lives in a safe, nurturing environment with access to quality education, healthcare, public spaces, and community service. Our mission is to raise awareness of the need for affordable homes and better communities across the country. We have a coalition of over 225 organizations across the country, nonprofit, for-profit, government, all working together on ambitious, bold goals over the next decade to make the new American dream a reality for everyone.
And thank you, Dave. So, E.B., tell us a little bit about you and what you do here in San Francisco as an architect.
Hi, I'm E.B. Min, and I founded Min Day in 2003 with my business partner, Jeff Day. We're a small, like everybody else, multidisciplinary firm. We have an office located here in San Francisco and also in Omaha, Nebraska. And so it's great to be able to work in 2 locations. We just also recently launched a furniture line for another company called Mod. We're very interested in all scales of work, landscape, architecture, furniture, art installations, but one thing that we do have a strong commitment to is pro bono work and design and fabrication. My business partner is able to run a student design build team out in Nebraska, and that is the way that we're able to exercise our commitment to pro bono projects.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Let me get back to our screen right here. Perfect. Okay, so I want to start delving right into the topic here of today. Or better, let me start with the topic of architecture and the city and lead into the topic of the Hangout. So this year's Architecture and the City Festival is really focused on the theme of home. And I will read here from their website. It says, home, the shifting nature of home, the different elements that contribute to its definition, and its relation to the urban fabric. So I am curious to hear from all of you here on our panel. It's like, what is home to you? How do you define home?
Who'd like to start?
Don't make me volunteer you. David,
Start.
all right.
Okay,
David? Andrew? Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I think that home, it of course works on many levels. I think at the very basic level, it's probably a center of some kind from which, not so much geographical as it is ontological. It has a lot to do with meaning, and it has both very broad repercussions, but also very specific qualities that belong to a sense of safety, a sense of protectivism, a sense of place that's centering. It's a place, I guess, from which there is all other things are perceived as other. So it gives you a place of kind of identity. It's a complex condition. I guess it has to do with comfort, which is a great word because it sort of means with strength. And I think the home is what gives you strength and gives you the place from which you then can expand outwards. And my home is both a city, I suppose, but it's also a place which so that word works on two levels. For me, it was Montreal where I came from, but now I think of home as San Francisco. I guess that means that somehow I've allowed San Francisco to change me, so that when I say I'm from San Francisco, that's my home. I've permitted the sort of nesting of San Francisco to have affected me in such a way that I could be perceived as a San Franciscan. And I've accepted that. It also gives me the strength and comfort and security to know that that's my hometown. And I guess at the level of the nest, the bird kind of pushes his shape against the nest and makes the home, which is his body. The home does the same thing in terms of its residential or dwelling qualities. We kind of make it our own, and from that centering point, we are ourselves. And as we look outwards, everything else needs definition beyond ourselves. So that's how I would define home.
I like Andrew's reference to different scales, that home can be thought of in an urban context, but also can be thought of as the human body and the reciprocation of the human body. But also just referring to home as a state of mind, if you will, that invokes all the senses, like smells and taste can embed themselves in one's memory. And so as architects, we have to remember when thinking about this idea of home that it is something that engages all the senses in the human body.
That's right. Yeah, E.B.
I just want to jump in. I think I agree with everything that's been said. Home can be seen as all different types of scales, but I think the thing that differentiates home versus house for a lot of people, at least for us as architects, and speaking in general, is that home is where emotional content is created, or you have an emotional connection to something. Otherwise, it's just a house. But I think that all of us, this is such an interesting question, because as an architect, we've all engaged in designing private residences. And when you meet a client, there's a whole getting to know them and getting to understand them to create a house. And so you really have to understand their idiosyncratic behavior, what they might have very specifically they want to be able to store in their house or show in their house, or the personality that they have, whether you want your house, your home, to reflect you as being generous or private, being open, being closed. It should be an expression, I think, of somebody's personality. I think especially in the city, getting back into, I think, what Andrew said about the big thing for me in a city and in a home is that I think for a lot of people, their home in an urban context really means that it's a place of refuge, a place of comfort, a place of sanctuary versus being out in the city. And it's in real opposition to where you do your work. So I think all those things are something I'd say is refers to home.
And I would just add, Aurora, that agree with everybody. And I think Americans take home and where they live for granted. It's just something where they start the day and end the day at a place. But it's so much more than that. We, as a movement, we start a lot of our conversations around what is home to you, because every answer is different. It usually evokes some sort of warm comfort feeling that everyone on the panel has already touched on. But it evokes things for other people who don't have home, and where they want to be in the decisions they make in life, all kind of come together and start at home. So I think what's exciting about home, and why I'm glad to see architecture in the city, talking about home, is that everybody has their own definition, but at the end of the day, it is that environment that affects the choices they make in life, who they become. It really does start at home.
Yeah, I think that touches on the idea of the reflected self. I think that's a great way of putting it, Dave, is that where you invest your emotion is in fact where the heart is, right? I mean, that's a sort of, the home is where the heart is.
So
it's cliche, but it definitely rings true.
Mm-hmm.
To take a raw kind of unromantic view of home. Home can also have negative connotations, and I think E.B. is right that emotion is the kind of ballast for the whole definition of home, and it's home to some people could be the bar down the street, which is their place of refuge,
right,
for better or for worse. And I think as architects we just have to remember that sort of centering, that emotional centering can happen in various places in various forms.
So I think you all touched on a lot of the, I need to take notes and have many hangouts on all of these themes. But one thing that I want to talk about is the fact that home is not just where we, wake up and go to sleep, but sort of the idea of the hometown. Like Andrew said, he moved from Montreal, and that feels like home to San Francisco. Now San Francisco is home. And I want to really introduce this idea of the third space, because that's what this hangout is about, and these extra places that are outside the home and outside the office, where we come together and we form relationships with our community. So I'm curious to hear from each one of you, like your relationship with designing third places and how you define a third place in your own practice.
I'll start again in a circle. I think that the third place is exactly that. I think that it's kind of hybridized. It has a home quality to it, as it has a character. It is a place, which is another discussion as to why a place is a place, not a space. Is that I think it takes character, which could be negative or positive, as David referred to. Sometimes places have negative connotations, but they have a personification of an identity. And a third place is one whose identity is not necessarily yours. It is a refuge. It is a hybrid of both a feeling of comfort, but also a feeling of neither a place which you work or a place that you've committed to making your life, feeding yourself, and also not a place where you feel completely safe. It has a very important infrastructure, probably, to democracy. It's the idea of a place that is transient, but also a place of equality or leveling, a usually very simple place. It isn't particularly extravagant. It won't be the opera house, probably. And so that neutrality is really important, and that there's no obligation to be there, and yet you go there in order to share and a place of discourse. And those are critical spaces, I think, for a thriving city and also a thriving democracy. So we treasure those, and designing those is about establishing that balance.
It's the idea of third space sort of plays into the history or the evolution of our firm at Aidlin Darling. We kind of got pigeonholed in high-end residential early in our evolution, and we realized that's not. We love doing high-end residential, but we also love thinking in a broader context about this notion of home and third space. So we made a very concerted effort to evolve our practice into the realm of these public spaces that had this notion of home, and consequently we sort of branched out into two realms, one of which is restaurants and the food and wine community, and the other is this idea of meditation and kind of a sort of mind space, and art kind of plays into that, and so we've done a number of projects that were related to that. So on the first, And also to not only do high-end residential, but to do actually affordable residential and do community-based projects.
And David, hold that thoughts right there, because I'm going to ask you to go through some of the things you do when you design restaurants.
Okay, great.
So I want to hear from E.B. and Dave about your approach to third places.
Sure. So I think the idea of third space is really interesting because, it's like when you talk about the third way, or that there's another choice, because everybody sort of looks at your life or asks you, where do you live and where do you work? So everything is set up in a binary relationship. There's work, and where do you live? But the third space is really a place that talks more about, well, what do you really do? What do you really care about? Where do you engage and form social relationships or other relationships that don't have anything to do with work or have nothing to do with home? And I think the big difference with the way that I see a third space versus saying just what I'd call public space is that third spaces generally, I don't think, revolve around building civic community necessarily, but they build some other kind of relationship or expression that is either art-related, spiritual, or social, but it isn't about, taking care of your sidewalk or taking care of the street in that regard. It's something a little bit more special than that asks you much more about, I think, who you are and what your beliefs are, or what your social ideas are.
Great. And Dave, you made a really good point when I chatted with you before the show that what surrounds a home is very, very important.
Yeah, so that's kind of the crux of the Home Matters movement, is that we're not just saying home is the physical structure, the four walls and a roof. We're saying what makes a nurturing, safe home are all the other things that impact your quality of life. So do you have a grocery store in your neighborhood? Do you have community spaces, just open community spaces? Do you feel safe in your community, your neighborhood? All of those things we're trying to link to home as something much more broader than just the actual physical unit. Our movement supporters all create affordable housing across the country, and they do it in a way, and I'll get to it a little more later in the hangout. They do it in a way that they think through when they're designing and thinking about what a community should be. That if we just have the unit of housing, that's good. Someone is now in a safe, affordable home. But when we talk about home more broadly, it's really, well then, do they have access to healthy foods? Do they have access to quality education and healthcare? Do they have access to the fun things in life, like movie theaters or art installations or other things that kind of create and make up those third spaces where they can have a happy, fruitful life? And that's what we feel is really important about our movement, is that home isn't just that physical structure. It's about everything else that impacts you in your life. And for many Americans, they don't have that. So we look to the architect and designing communities. We look to our nonprofit supporters. And when they go about designing that community, they take all of that in to make sure it's not just the unit, but something much more.
So I really hear all these themes in what you're saying. So home, hometown, safety, comfort, community. And I want to start now breaking it down. But before I do that, I want to ask everybody who is watching this live, write in on the event page, tell us what home is to you and what a third space is to you and what you think is the importance of these community spaces in your community. And also don't forget to write questions, and we'll ask your questions live to all our panelists. So, all right, so I wish we had like 10 hours here to discuss about all the different types of third places, but we don't. So let me talk about a few that just come to mind to me. So since I'm Italian, I like to start with food and the gathering around food. And, you know, David, you talked about your practice being about the 5 senses and your restaurant work, and I would like to invite you to share a little bit more about your approach, and if you have any images and you want to share with us that as well.
Sure. I'll see if I can do this. Let's see here. Can you all see that?
It's loading right now. Yes. Wonderful.
Great. So we're not restaurant designers per se, but we do restaurants, and again, as I was saying earlier, we think of them as kind of an extension of this idea of home, but they're also hubs for community building. And this is, the image that you see is Bar Agricole here in San Francisco. And what makes this project special is that a lot of artists and artisans were culled together in collaboration to do this project, which kind of created a community in and of itself in terms of the development of the architecture. Simultaneous to doing this project, we did a proposal for an edible schoolyard in the Potrero area, in an underserved niche of the Potrero Hill area. And one of the things that that Dave mentioned that resonated with me is this idea that you can have a home, but if you don't have the layers of support around that home, whether no matter what the demographic is, if you don't have those layers, then it starts to kind of decompose on itself. And so having access to healthy food and the community that comes with that, vis-a-vis an edible schoolyard or some other mechanism, is really critical.
So David, is there something specific that you think about when you're, give us a couple maybe of things you think about when you design a restaurant or a gathering place around food that you think is specifically important to that kind of place?
Well, in the case of Bar Agricole, there was the ethos that the owner proprietor brought to the table, which is one of maximum sustainability, a progressive notion of like it's LEED Platinum or nothing. Where the ingredients come from, if you want to get a rum drink, you will not find Bacardi at Bar Agricole because it's a commercial product. So it's the people who make the people behind the things that you see and experience are community-based, and it's not like a large conglomerate. And so you take it, that's kind of the macro view, and then the micro view is just the materiality of the space, and the fact that you can smell it, you can feel it, it has a tactility that sort of nurtures a notion of home, but it also reciprocates the urban context around it. That's kind of the micro view. And then in between is the idea that this place can actually catalyze activity in an otherwise forgotten part of the city, potentially. Mm-hmm. And that's also becomes really an important part of it.
So great. So that's a great example of restaurant design. And another type of third place that comes to mind is the gathering around faith. And when I was looking at E.B. your work, I saw that you had an interfaith space you designed. So I realized I always think of religion as very separate, people worshiping with their own, around the same religion, but you challenged that with a different kind of space. And I'm curious what kind of challenges or what kind of benefits there were into going outside one religion and creating a space for all sorts.
Sure. I'd be happy to talk about it. Let me share my screen.
Yes, and David, you can come back from your screen share and join us.
I'm trying to do that.
Okay, so just click on the screen share button on the left.
Yes. I just have to click on the window first. Got it. Thank you.
No problem. Okay, so E.B.
Okay.
So for everybody here who's watching us, so there's a little bit of a technicality here in doing these hangouts, and I do them all the time.
We're neophytes.
Sometimes when it's the first time, it's a little bit tricky. So E.B., do you not see?
No, I'm sorry. I'm trying to press the screen share, and it won't go.
Okay, so sometimes what happens there is that you might want to close the window that you had open to share with us, and then reopen it, and then re-click on the screen share button, and it will reappear.
Okay. I apologize for the delay.
This will give more time to all our viewers to share in the comments their ideas of home and third places, and also think of questions. We have these 4 amazing panelists, and I like to grill them with some questions from you out there. So send your questions so I can ask them whatever is on your mind. Okay, so you know what I can do? E.B, if you want.
I'm going to forward you the link.
Put it in the chat. Can you put it in the chat? Yeah, and I will share it. So you can just start chatting about your project, and I will prepare this.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So go right ahead.
Okay. So as Aurora had mentioned, we had designed a project down at Santa Clara University for what they were proposing as an interfaith space. And it was a really interesting project for us because they had made it's a Jesuit university, but they had made a strong commitment to creating a multi-faith space because they recognized that their student population was changing, and it wasn't primarily Catholic any longer, that they wanted to become much more welcoming and accommodating to all the students who were coming to their campus. And I think that in terms of third space, it's really interesting because while we're thinking of home and work, as a student, your life is really revolving around classes and dorm or your apartment. And for the students at SCU, a lot of them feel very strongly about their faith, whether they are Catholic, Protestant, Buddhist, or Muslim, or anything else. So one of the challenges in creating this third space was, how do we reference spirituality and the ability to accommodate all religions and all kinds of activities within that space, whether it's prayer, ceremony, private meditation, Zen group meditation, or a sort of university-wide Thanksgiving ceremony, and not have overt references to any religion. And we really took the tack of thinking about it from a spiritual point of view. And in order to create the feeling of an unusual space, what we did was really look to geometry and the sort of ways that people think of space. So the room is actually based on an insertion into an old part of the campus. It starts off as a rectangle and then transforms itself into an ellipse, and that ellipse is shifted to face Mecca, which is a subtle way of giving Muslim students the indication of Mecca's direction, but not making an overt reference for anybody else. So that subtle geometry, we thought, that's clearly not something you ever see in a home, a classroom, or in a public space. So already, I think by manipulating geometry, we were talking about universal themes that appear in lots of different religions and spiritual traditions. The other thing that was very important to us is that this transformation would be both at once understood and mysterious. And in order to achieve that, we decided to use a very basic building material. We took cedar 2x, or not even 2x4s, and then made several different size units of them, and were able to create a way that the pattern would be laid out. So you could see the individual pieces of wood, and then it became increasingly distorted and rough as it shifted from a rectangle to that ellipse above. And then if you, the view that Aurora has up is looking at it from the ground up into the space, and then if you keep scrolling over, you can see the way it was. You would enter the space from the campus into a very regular looking threshold, and then through that threshold transition, you would enter into the multi-faith space. And you can keep scrolling over and keep going. So the idea that you leave the campus behind, and there's this moment of transition where you're in between campus and spiritual space, and then keep going one more. And then as you enter the space, keep scrolling, please. You can see the way that the space will start to fold and bend towards you, and then keep going. And ultimately, you can scroll all the way to the end. The space was meant to be reconfigurable, and it's very small and very simple. But we realized because it's students, most of the events would actually occur at night. So part of the design was definitely meant to transition to a space that would be mysterious and mysteriously lit in the evening.
So that was wonderful, and if anybody here wants to spend more time on the images, you can just go take a look at EB's website, and Barbara, my colleague here behind the scenes, is going to post the link for you on the event page. Okay, so that's another great example of a third space, and let me talk now with Andrew. I want to ask you, Andrew, about one of my favorite spaces in San Francisco, which is the Botanical Gardens. I love it, and I found out actually after I invited you to join us here that you worked on some of the designs. So I'd like to hear more about your approach to landscape architecture.
Sure, that'd be great. I'm just tried doing full screen. Does that work? Yep.
Yes, it works really well.
I think everyone knows, certainly in our firm, we have an opportunity to work with a lot of public spaces because of the firm's name, Interstice, means that space between things, and we think of the public realm as basically kind of this larger landscape. And in that landscape, we work on both commercial buildings, which I guess are third places, but certainly one thing that differentiates us is a concentration on public spaces that are perhaps ideal third places because, like a botanical garden, it is, it's this enormous place that people go and have all kinds of connections to and memories to. And I think in our work, it's one example of a project that we are involved in the evolution of a third place that is going to be there in perpetuity and has been there for a very long time. And we're going to keep working with master plans and keep changing it and moving it slightly, which is different than, say, the USF campus, where we did a transformation of that landscape through the introduction of the science building and really made a new heart of that campus, which is, again, a third place because campuses, again, are open to public. But they are also hybridized because there is a place, a lot of people work there, as they do at the garden, and a lot of people, it's their home. The students live there. So that's an interesting second kind of third place. And then we do work that is more creation of third places, which we've had examples of here before. But this one is one where I think we're really evolving a larger space. And the Botanical Garden, has an intensely public quality, and it's a classic third place. Everyone has memories of this place. And we spent years now working on 4 miles of pathways and introducing a different way of choreographing experience through the garden. Part of it was that this is a museum for plants. It is a compelling collection. It has enormous connections to other places in the world because of its plants. The plants are what's on display there. But at the same time, it opens itself up to having events, and we've been working with them on their gates and on their fountain, starting to manipulate these places to allow them to be more transitional and have a different form of memory, like their events, their feasts, and the things that are ritualized within the gardens, not just the exhibiting of the collections. And this project was very intense. You can see this is the fountain that we reconfigured, and it's slowly now filling in with pavers that are donated pavers, and so there's a way of funding the larger field of this, but reconfiguring something that was a master plan from Tito back in the 60s and before that. This garden has been evolving, and a lot of what we did is kind of invisible today. You go through the path, you experience other collaborated artists, designers of the gardens, and we spent a lot of time thinking how you'd move through them, but also opportunities for stopping and staying within places. So we create within this larger third place smaller third places for things to occur, like pathways that go through gardens that were inaccessible before, choreographing motions through walls and around trees, and then having docent moments where things can happen that are educational, pedagogical in nature, because the garden serves so many different levels of being a destination internationally. It's a world-class exhibit. It's an unusual growing environment. But what you see is kind of the solution here starts with enormous interventions that are kind of now invisible. People come here. This is the docent overlook of the pond. And before that, you spend so much time collaborating with archivists and horticulturalists and collection managers and curatorial staff, because what you're really doing is you are in a museum, and these things live, and they cannot stop living because sometimes these are the only species in this entire hemisphere where these things are growing. So we spend a lot of time being very careful, quite disruptive, but using structures that are extremely sensitive to the soil. We're around a 150-year-old beech tree here, and we don't want to disturb it, but then all that goes away and it makes this amazing place that then becomes neutral, a leveling ground. And one thing that we're involved with a lot of our projects was that not only do we have the community that serves the people, but we're also very aware of this other community, in this case plants, but certainly in USF, when we opened up that campus to the larger community, we took the client and said, you know, we need to think about where you're putting this. NBBJ built the building, the Science Center, but in that creation of that Science Center, they collaborated a lot, very closely with all the other, of which we were one of them, the landscape architects, to decide that the campus would be changed by the building. And at first the building was over in a corner of the campus, and it was moved then, through the decision of the client, to a whole other area, because science was being put at the core of their curriculum, and why shouldn't this building then be the core of their campus? And then why doesn't that building, which is 2/3 underground, enfold itself so deeply into the landscape that the public space of the building, or the outside third place, becomes a new campus center? And we took that as a charge to make it a unique project where you'll see even the buildings, these, you know, where the building is folded into 3 levels of landscape, and you can't really tell where the building begins and where you're on. Here you're on the roof of the laboratories. Below you are the entrances to all the classrooms in this river of landscape that runs through it, each one designing as a place. These people are sitting on the skylights of the classrooms below, and the little part of the building that sticks up here is the upper laboratories and classrooms. So most of the building is underground, and the landscape and the building become completely intermixed in such a way that you're not sure where one begins and when one ends. And that's the exciting thing, is that not only does the building do that, but then we began to think about the communities that invest themselves in this campus as not just people, but we have to insects and birds and park, and this can also be a pedagogical enhancement to the whole campus, because this campus for hundreds of years had been sort of foundation planting, and we said, well, why doesn't your campus become scientifically important? So we looked at species diversity. At the same time, we make these large undulating lawns for people to sit on in the places at the top level, the middle level, and the bottom level. We're also making places for the other people who live here, which are the birds and the insects and the obligates to the species. So we began to look at a much deeper chain of third place, which is an intercommunity of people. And this, I have some pictures here that show you how would you look at this place if you were the plant looking back. And I think it's a really important seasonal aspect. And so the campus design became one of a much larger place, which here's the University Civic Center. The cafeterias are all underneath. This is the Harvey Science Center, and this is the new building. The middle part was a complete redesign of Harvey Plaza. And they didn't, Harvey Plaza was a space, but now it has a space of a much more shared identity, because we took the client way out and said, you're not just a campus, you're a green space on a flyway for the Pacific Byway where, you know, millions of birds. And you need to participate in that, because not only does this landscape become the outside of your buildings, but it perhaps is a classroom, it's a learning experience, it's an exemplary experience of interconnectivity between your students, the buildings that they inhabit, the place that they are, but also the exchange that happens, not just between them as learners, but them with the environment around them and the city. So we went through a lot of science. As the process here is multiple studies of heat, wind, shadow, and all ways of really developing the project so that we could predict where the spaces for rituals would occur. We looked at all of their seating for fairs and dining and audiences, and could they do sprays. And then every plant gets treated like a character in the space. And every area is planted so that the seasonality and the species diversity begins to increase. We even made a pond in there, which is an outdoor feature that actually is an active ecology. At the same time, this landscape is high performance. It collects and treats all the stormwater coming off the buildings. And the main campus walk was redesigned so that it's centered back on the St. Ignatius Church. So by realigning the campus, we not only connected the heart back, but gave the campus a new order in which a major spine of a street is another third kind of place, and people sit along that street. And I'm just showing you some of the seasonality that is involved in a project like this, but it's a highly technical, this is where the architects, as architects in the firm, and the landscape architects really don't work separately. It's a highly technical adventure to make a 3-story multiple sectional building is completely ground. So the confusion of ground was critical, and I think that always goes back to this interconnectivity, so that this space becomes really usable. And then this last thing is just a project that I think begins to touch on a fourth space, which is a space that's created as a sort of neutral territory. It is owned. It is a place both a person works, but it's this big empty box. And just to close on it, a fourth space is another kind of evolution of this third space idea, where you can get certain things done in third spaces, but if you really want to have meetings and events, sometimes the space isn't convertible. And so the convertibility of this space was one that was exciting to us as a kind of a neutral leveling space, really simple materials, and quite an elegant outcome, we think, that then can be used by this person for his workshop, a dream shop. It's an event space. It's where he brings his trucks in. I don't know if
So
you're seeing
Andrew,
it.
you're
Yeah.
touching on a lot of other things there, which I have to get you back on the
Sure.
show for another episode. But definitely where the private and the public intersect.
Exactly.
That's something that we can definitely chat about. But I want to be mindful of the time, and so we talked about faith spaces and food spaces and outside garden spaces, and also both you and E.B. Touched on education spaces. I want to try and get another couple of examples in there, but before I go to that, let me see how much more we can discuss today. And I want to bring Dave back here from Home Matters in the conversation, and I would like you, Dave, to start the answer to this question, which is really for everybody here, which is how important it is for architects to involve the community when planning a third place, and how can architects work more productively with the local community. So let's talk about architects and community working together or not on these spaces.
Yeah, sure, thank you, and I appreciate the opportunity to put my three new friends on the spot and say that it's very important that you involve the community. And I want to bring up some examples of some of the work our groups are doing out in the field, in particular community housing partners, which have their own architects in-house designing affordable housing, but definitely with the community in mind. And as for some examples, this community room in Charlottesville, Virginia, again, designing spaces and future homes for Americans who can't afford home, but not just leaving it at the home and the unit of housing, but bringing in something more like this community center and other spaces that if I could move the screen, I would.
I was just going to ask you, is if are you right now with your cursor on your website?
You should all be seeing a very pretty home. A community building, do you not?
Try this, get out of the screen share by clicking on the screen share button.
Yeah.
And then try joining the screen share again and see if maybe
Okay.
that will unfreeze it. All right, well, everybody watching this, usually like screen shares go pretty, smooth, but every once in a while, this is a free platform, and we have some glitches. And here we have the infinity effect.
Yeah, sorry. So here we have. I'm hoping people can see this energy-efficient community building in Charlottesville.
And you can't. No, David. Right now you're in the wrong screen share. So you want to leave the screen share completely by clicking on the screen share button.
Yeah. All right. There I am. You'll have to be forced to look at me. But yes, I think it's very important that architects work with the community. As I mentioned, we have many groups who all work within a local community or regional community and bring the input of the community to what they design for the affordable housing population in their community. So I applaud all of you in the work you're doing. I think it speaks, the examples we just saw speak directly to how we need to kind of rethink about where people live, and that it's not just the home, the unit, but it's the home and everything that surrounds us. It's, do we have a urban garden that we can go to and interact with one another? Do we have places of worship where we're bringing people together? Do we have public spaces like botanical gardens where we can congregate and learn from each other? So I think it's very important, and I'm glad the three examples we saw kind of all incorporate that. And we'd love to hear your thoughts from the three of you as you design stunning things, your perception of what that means.
I am really curious from all of you how you collaborate or not with the local community when building this, if there's any process. And that's what, that's what my question is for everybody here. How much do you bring in the community? Are these private projects, public projects? I know, Andrew, that the botanical garden is a bit of a hybrid in that sense.
That's a very community-oriented project. Of course, San Francisco owns it. I mean, it's ours, and it's ours to use as we wish. And it's also a public-private partnership. There is the City of San Francisco that owns it, Golden Gate Park, and then there's also the Botanical Garden Society, which funds a lot of its changes, and they're really in charge of its stewardship. And the two work together really well. There's no part of that project that isn't highly community oriented. And that's the same thing when we're working on housing projects. We're working on a low cost housing project right now with David Baker, three actually, and we're always doing outreach to community. We present to them. We come to them for ideas. We present workshops where we can we present tools that allow the community to look at our drawings at a very early stage. Sometimes even conceptualize. We even make maps and sort of diagrams that they can then interface with through post-it notes, through coloring books. We've tried everything. Where there's really an interface to sit down at a table, and we do group maybe 6 or 8 tables that are thematically organized so that people can talk about if they're interested in, their yard, their inner home amenities, childcare, things that need to be incorporated, the community around, the outside of the building, the materiality of the building, the sort of more the way it unfolds, the kind of choreographing of space of the building, the organizational qualities. These are all things that are heavily collaborated on. I think that's less in a public, in private projects that is more reserved. I think your engagement with the community is inevitable. I think as an architect, we are educators. I think we are, in fact, engagers. We are activists very often. I think the other three can speak to this as well. We're always trying to push for a direction, and that's the community engagement I think that happens in a private project. In public, it's really explicit. I mean, it really is a very large part of our process.
I think generally speaking, it's important for architects not to be too prescriptive, right, especially in the public realm, where if we can create armatures for activity and community, exactly, it actually can take on a life of its own, and it's a very dynamic thing. As Andrew sort of alluded to, it's a living organism that takes on a life of its own when we're gone.
I think I want to mention too, collaboration is a huge component of design, and all architects will talk about that. But what we found in whether it's a community-based project or a private project is that collaboration is such a generic term, and what we're really trying to get to is eliciting information and opinions or just weird off-the-cuff remarks that actually will spark the design. Because often what we find is that what people come in with and say that they're interested in is not really what they're interested in, or it's not really the root problem, whatever they're talking about. They talk about the symptom, but not the problem. So I think the issue for architects in collaborating on projects is that we have to become much better at teasing out what the real issue is for somebody and not the symptom of what we're trying to fix. The other thing is what we found in collaboration, whether it's with the community or whether it's private clients, is that the people who come and talk, they also have to think a lot about what they're trying to say and not just offer up a litany of complaints or wish list items, but what are the goals that they would like to see achieved in the project. So I think in terms of collaboration, architects in general, I mean, if we can structure the collaborative process well, then I think it yields much better results.
Can I just add to that?
Sure.
In the sort of pre-design phase, or whatever you want to call it, I think it's important to dig very deep so that when you're collaborating, or whatever the word you want to use, with the user or the stakeholder, that you have to kind of dig underneath the surface, and like if it's I think talking to the sort of all the different layers of an organization rather than just the top layer will give you information. I think that's what E.B.'s alluding to. It'll get you unexpected information, but it also gives you the information you really need to do that.
I think architects have to be they have to entice information out, and E.B. is completely right. We have to be a little bit clever about finding out what really is happening. There's a sort of a diagnosis. I think I like that idea of the symptom, and because I think that the information that it really can move, be a design driver, it might be something that is really incredibly important, but quite subsurface in the psyche of a lot of things that people might complain or constructively advocate for. They're actually advocating for something that's deeper, and that goes to the design problem at its root.
Dave, do you want to add anything to this?
No, it's just great to hear. I mean, our partner organizations throughout the country, again, in thinking and working very close with communities, it is kind of teasing out what people want out of their neighborhood. What do they want in their community? And kind of cobbling together all of the resources that it takes from the private sector and architects to the government sector, and the subsidy that comes into any one project, and making it worthwhile. So at the end of the day, you're not getting the old school Cabrini Green in a neighborhood. You're getting the new school examples that I was hoping to show you, where you really are integrating human lives, so that people live in their safe, healthy home, and then go out into their safe, healthy neighborhood and have a community center and have the grocery store and have these other assets of a community where they're allowed to thrive and be nurtured. So great to hear from my friends that we're all on the same page there.
Great. So I do have a question here from the audience, and I don't have the answer. I wonder if anybody here knows. The question is Architecture and the City planning a tour of USF?
It is actually. It's going to be September 26th. I want to be right about that. And we'll be giving a tour of the entire campus. I think everyone should come. Not only because it benefits the AIA, but I think it's a very exciting and unusual campus in the city for what it's trying to do. I think it's exemplary. And I think the Jesuits have to be really extremely lauded for their courage. And I know that they bring everybody through that campus. It's one of their biggest recruiting tools for students, because that is the new heart, and it's not just a heart as a social space, it's a heart of connectivity, and I think it digs deep to the idea of service that the Jesuits do, portray.
That's great. That's great. And E.B., I know you have an event as well for Architecture in the City you're going to speak at.
Oh yeah, it's a walking tour. I think it's a tour of Dogpatch, my home, my second home, so my office, and the neighborhood in Dogpatch.
Great. You can share with everybody the third places you frequent.
Also, the Minna Street project, the box or the Dream Space, is going to be the headquarters for the home tours. So if you come to the home tours, you will also visit, and we will be giving tours of that the big box space, which is the food truck workshop event classroom something. Actually, we haven't been able to name it yet. I can't get the clients to agree on a name.
That's great.
They don't want to give it a name. It's like open. So.
Maybe
Aurora.
Yeah. Go ahead.
While we're promoting, we're also a part of the conference next Friday, where we're going to have a panel with a cognitive scientist, an architect, an affordable houser, and a social interest nonprofit, all talking about what the future of affordable housing looks like, and it's the kind of the tease to what we are going to do with the challenge. And I don't know if people can see this on their screen, the New American Dream Design Challenge, where we're going to come to you guys as architects across the country and try to, again, think through what are the elements of creating the affordable home of the future, and what does it mean to say an American lives in a safe, nurturing environment that has access to all of these exciting and essential third spaces. And I would encourage everybody who's interested to go there now. We'll officially launch later this fall, but in the meantime, any architects, designers who are interested in being a part of it, it'll be a big deal. It'll be a lot of fun, and I encourage you to sign up if you're interested.
That's wonderful. And David, did I leave you out of this? Anything you want to share right now?
I think we're doing a panel as part of the festival called The Designer and the Chef or something like that.
Oh, yeah. That sounds like a great, make sure to attend the panel after you eat something.
Yes, exactly.
Yes, do you know when that is? Do you remember the date?
Actually am embarrassed to say I do not remember the date of that.
Okay, so David might be there or not, depending if you remember.
Exactly.
But check on the website when that event is. And actually, David, we have a few more minutes, but I want to squeeze in something else from you, because you mentioned art spaces and meditation spaces as third places. So I find that I would never think of meditation as in the category of third place. So I was wondering if you can share a little bit with us your thoughts about that and your design.
Well, we were hired by Stanford University to design a contemplation space, and the project was conceived by the late painter Nathan Oliveira and one of his patrons as a place of refuge or escape from the sort of stress of academic life, which has become very intense. But the interesting thing about it in the context of third space is it uses the paint. It's not a museum per se, but it uses Nathan's paintings, the Windover series, as a vehicle for meditation and contemplation and recentering. And so it very specifically creates a third space option for students who basically have no such thing. And so from a design point of view, the building's almost done. It's going to open next, or actually in a couple weeks. But from a design perspective, it allowed us to use this idea of designing for all the senses, the acoustics, the tactility, as a way to shed the sort of baggage of the day and kind of find your own mental place. I can try to screen share.
And I'm sharing it right now. Do you see it on my screen?
Okay, so that's another project.
Oh, okay. All right. Sorry about that. I thought this was the one.
The project that you were showing actually influenced what's called the Windover Contemplation Center at Stanford.
Okay.
Let me see if I can pull it up here. Do you all see a plan?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So basically, I don't know if you know Stanford University's campus, but there's the Papua New Guinea Sculpture Garden, beautiful grove of oak trees. We basically annexed that as part of the experience of the building. So the building kind of turns its shoulder against this parking lot on one side, but it's really about, the design was very much generated by the idea of how you move through a garden to get into the building, and it's a very tactile experience. You hear the crunching of the gravel, and you hear the water in the reflecting pond, and then you experience the paintings and the grove of trees.
Borrowed landscape.
Borrowing the landscape, which is designed by Andy Cochran. These are some construction photos. This is a rendering of the entry space. But the idea, and if you ask me what my favorite third space would be, it would usually be found in nature. And so the idea is that in a lot of our buildings we try to be deferential and subservient to the natural context. The other unique thing about this building is students can come at 3 in the morning and look at the paintings and experience what the building has to offer in terms of that third space.
That's great. So I'm glad we got to see some more of your projects, David. So don't forget to exit the screen share on the side, and we have just a few minutes left. So I want to ask you my last question, that is, what is your favorite third place and why? And give me the short answer, please. Who wants to go first? How about we go with Dave right here?
Sure. It's not the traditional third space, textbook definition, but it's a grocery store. in my neighborhood, I run into family, I run into neighbors in the grocery store. It's usually a family event where my wife and 2 kids all go together, and it kind of forces you as you interact with neighbors and family that you got to spend that social capital. You do have to talk about what's going on in your life at that point. You do talk about things that are happening at home and school and all those sorts of things. So to me, it's the place where I do spend a lot of my social capital getting to know friends and family.
Great. And E.B., how about you?
It's hard to pick a favorite, but I'm going to talk about a favorite third space in San Francisco, which I live right by Dolores Park. So I feel like Dolores Park is a prime example because, I both love and hate it for a variety of reasons.
It's the
but, I've lived in the neighborhood for a long time, and I love to see how it's changed. And what I find amazing about the park is it's big, but this, the sort of vista it gives to the city in terms of its physicality, but also its social changes, has been kind of amazing. And the fact that pretty much every weekend there's a different event being hosted by a different group gives me a real snapshot into, I think, the social life of the city. Plus, of course, I also go there with my child and play on the playground and run into families and all of that. But there are probably, 10 different groups of people using that park at the same time very actively, and it's all being very simultaneous activities without actually being related, which I think is really interesting.
That's great. So we'll go to Andrew, and then we'll close with David then. So Andrew, what is your favorite third place?
I think that I would have to, if I was given a choice of where I'd be tomorrow, if I had to be anywhere in the third place, I think I would start to pick at the peripheries as well. I would go. I go to spaces that are outside primarily. I think they're spaces where nature and the city kind of come to an edges. It might be from my childhood, but certainly memory plays a lot into that idea of the neutrality of those spaces, and also the sort of the surprise, the seasonality of them, the changes, the deference to events that occur and events in your life that you connect to. I think that's what certainly gives me a lot of strength. And the people you meet there, and the people can all be there. There's a real, you can meet anybody in these spaces, and you're sharing an experience that is kind of fundamental and really deep. So I would probably be on the edge of the waterfront, or I grew up on an island in Montreal, and now I'm living in a peninsula, and I've always remembered picking those spaces that are edges of the city. The Presidio is a great example as well. I mean, it's endless, the places you can explore there, and there's something always to discover and learn. I think they always, and there's no pressure upon you to purchase or buy, or there's really the simple sense of being there for the pleasure of being there, and then it offers everything back. So I think those are the ones that are most edifying for me.
That's great. And David?
So kind of cheating here, but my favorite third space is actually on my bicycle, which is a very versatile third space. So I can experience the city and the landscape, but I can also be in solitude in the vein of the meditation, and then at the same time, if I want, I can enjoy a community. There's a pretty amazing and vast cycling community in the Bay Area, which we're really spoiled by.
True.
Well, I will let the audience here decide whether your answer is acceptable as a third place. And I have to wrap this up. It's been amazing to talking to everybody. So thank you. E.B., David, Dave, and Andrew for participating. I'm going to go back to my slides in just 1 second. Let me make sure everything is set up correctly here. Okay, and here we go. Oops, let's see. And I want to let everybody know that in our next hangout, we have another really special episode with the co-chairs of Acadia. We're going to talk about new trends in computing that will change the architectural profession. So I would say, especially if you're Rhino users, you do not want to miss this episode of How to Succeed in Architecture. Thank you, everybody. And this was the 14th episode, Third Places, the Architecture of Sharing. Make sure to connect and register for our mailing list if you want to be the first to know about any upcoming hangouts or about our weekly webinar series. And thank you for everybody. Thank you from the whole team. Make sure to also connect on Facebook, Google+, and Twitter. We are very active. And I also want to thank my colleague Barbara, who is behind the scene on Google+, taking care of all your comments and questions. All right, thank you. I'm going to end it right here.
It's been a pleasure.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Nice meeting you guys.
You.